And I was here before talking about the Wenrick property. If we weren't ready to sell or develop, being able to develop off of First Street, said they could do that. So during our conversation, the important thing I want to share with you tonight is he shared with me that the way everything went with the development, that Stafford Development assured him that Cheryl and I were on board supporting the development. And he never had that conversation with us. So I'm talking with Mr. Brown, is he had said that if he would have known that, he would have proceeded in a different manner, because himself and the planning staff of the city proceeded with thinking that Cheryl and I were on board supporting the development, which we do support the development, just we have huge concerns about our property being on the corner of it. So I had met with Stafford after the last planning commission, shared with him that the city, Mr. Brown said that the Wenrick property, which is the one with the cul-de-sac with the access off of our property, that it could, their Wenrick property could be developed off of Fir. So I asked them if they could change the access of our property. They said no. They said that 15th Street, that the city would not accept a change with that. Because when I was here before, I had shared with you, all of you were not here at the time, that I wanted all the access removed off of our property. So on the property plans in here in the middle for the water and sewer, that street is removed going north to south, which is the street that's going right through the middle of our house. So I talked with him about several different plans for our property, possibly, because I just want it left blank on the picture, the description, and they're putting this stuff here, and I would rather not have that there. So when I talked with Mr. Brown then, I talked to him about, someday I might want to develop my property. I don't want to sell at the time. Mr. Brown shared, most people get offered money to sell their property and they move. Cheryl and I don't want to do that. So my concern is that, so I came up with a solution, what I thought is, so there's a picture that's kind of on the back, and I shared with the city council and with Mr. Brown that they want to run 15th Street through our property. So I talked about possibly, instead of 15th Avenue being an avenue, about making it a loop, which would mean the removal of lots 17 and 10 under the Beck development. That way there'd be access. I'm not a city planner or in planning or anything like that, but that would help alleviate an issue with that. Everybody's kind of been putting stuff on our property, so I have a friend who's a builder out of state and grew up in Canby, so one thing at a city council meeting that was discussed by Stafford was possibly putting some townhouses or attached housing on our property. So my friend was able to draw something briefly up with that. It's not official, it just gives an example on that. So when I left meeting with Mr. Brown, I kind of told him I was going to be pursuing this. So I contacted the planner, contacted Mr. Brown, and she called me back, and she had said that the city really was not willing to have this access off of our property. Not there, because his concern was about the Wenricks being able to have the opportunity to have maximum capability of developing their property. So that would be access through our property. I understand Stafford Development wants the maximum on that of what they develop. You know, the Becks are moving, wish them the best, been great neighbors for 33 years. Stafford wants what's best for them. I'm sure the Wenricks will want what's best for them. But Cheryl and I are kind of like in an awkward spot on this. So I see everyone else being able to have the possibility of maximum development for their property, and we're kind of being the thoroughfare for the other developments. So like I said, the meeting was on the 11th. I just wanted to share some of this information before the 11th. It's important to Cheryl and I, and just wanted to share that. Any questions?
You got this block in yellow. Is all of that yours?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Anybody else have a question? I don't know if we can actually give you any answers, Roger. I think you're doing the right thing by pursuing this. You've been in contact with Brian.
And you guys have not been meeting, so I've been going to the city council meetings, keeping them up to date also. I said, it's just this one plan is, in this one piece across from the thumbprint for the access to the Wenricks. So our lot's on that. So, you know, the lots that they've kind of put in there, it looks like a jigsaw puzzle. So people, you know, those are lots that they're just pictures, I get it. But the pictures are really, I believe, of lots that people would not be interested in purchasing. You're not going to be able to plug and play any kind of a house probably in for most of those lots. I think that when you look at the lots kind of a thing, they might have to be doing some special design work or something like that, which would, you know, cost money also on that. So anyway, like I said, it's important to Cheryl and I share a little bit of information with you folks before the meeting on the 11th. And I wish you all the best, and I'll be seeing you on the 11th, okay? Thank you.
Brian, is this a low-density residential, or is it medium density?
Yeah, it's low density.
And I see
There's a section, actually this part is R1.5, the low density line is shown on that map going east-west. This is low density here, and that's R1.5 where he's at.
I don't know how accurate these square foot sizes is, but they all look in the 5,000 foot range to me.
So one thing that was, so at the city council meeting when, you know, the annexation was approved and stuff, is there were some townhouses, attached houses shown on our property. It was a concept, that it was an option. I said, Mr. Brown and I talked about this. We talked about everything that was developed on my street. You know, I said I would actually like to be able to have an option of having a court like 14th Court, that I could have a house and a couple of rentals and sell the rest of it. Hope Village could be interested in putting a development just like they've got on Pacific Crest Drive, where someday Cheryl and I might want to sell to them, get money, and live in a cottage, which already takes place on the street, and also then being able to have, you know, an option with us. So townhouses were, Mr. Brown and I said, Mr. Brown and I talked about this, and he said that would be possible. Or as I said, it was discussed, and it was very optimistic about that. So there was discussion. I just did not throw those on there for giggles.
Okay. Thank you, Roger.
Everyone have a good evening.
Do you know what I'm talking, do you see what I'm talking about, Brian, on all those lots being 5,000 square feet?
Yeah.
What
and
happened to our 7,000 square foot minimum?
Again, you're in the R1.5 area.
Down there at Rogers Place?
Yeah, that is the
Oh, okay.
R1.5 area.
Okay, thank you. Any other items of interest? Okay. Approval of Planning Commission minutes for April 23rd, 2018. Do I have
Mr. Vice
a-
Chair, I would make a motion that we approve the minutes from April 23rd, 2018.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Approve the minutes of April 23rd, 2018. Okay, we're here tonight to consider a minor modification request a change to a conditional of approval in Northwoods Estates, Phase 3 subdivision, SUB 17-01, in order to construct a two-story home instead of a single-story home, Mod 18-01. This is a public hearing to test.
So it's actually a new business item, so you don't need to read the quasi judicial.
Oh, good.
Yeah, you can wait till the next one to do that.
Okay. So what do we do then? Go to the,
Move right to the staff report.
okay. And we'll have the staff report. Thank you, Brian.
So this, staff's deeming this a minor modification, and it's located in Northwoods Phase 3, which is 11th Avenue up here on this drawing. Get my, I guess it's not going to work on that. Like that. It just doesn't like the paper or something. I can't control it. There it's not going where I want it to go. Oh, you're so close. Wow. So this is 11th Avenue, and boy, it doesn't want to move. Is it? I know where it is, but it won't go there. I can't get that to work. It's just not working. Sure looks like it's me, but it's... We've got another map that shows a lot.
Because you're left-handed.
You think that's why? Okay, so this is, are you sure that's the lot? There it is. There, I didn't think that was the lot. So lot 94 is the subject of this particular minor modification. It's part of the Phase 3 development, and there was a voluntary agreement at the public hearing when this phase of the Northwoods subdivision was approved to make certain lots that were adjacent to the long-time existing subdivisions restricted to one-story homes so that there'd be a greater degree of compatibility stepping away from those homes that had been there for 30, 40 years, thereabouts. And on this particular lot that was listed in the condition of approval, it was the last lot listed, and the applicant has indicated in his narrative he presented that this was actually an error. And it was an error in terms of the fact that what the intent was is to protect the adjacent long-time existing home. Well, this backs up to a lot that was in Phase 2 of Northwoods, which is not a long-time existing home. It's one of the lots that were actually part of his subdivision. And so it wasn't really necessarily considered the reason why all of the other lots were placed in that condition. Look here. See, here's a map that just shows us the two lots here. So the lot to the north indicates that it's in Northwoods Phase 2. And so that is the lot that's most directly impacted by this request. And the applicant indicated in their narrative that they had talked with that particular owner, and that owner did not have problems with the proposed two-story home that was proposed for lot 94 if the modification to eliminate that restriction, which is what he's asking for at this hearing, would be approved. This kind of a photo here, and did we decide for sure, Lainey? We'll let the applicant.
It's the home on the left.
So we think it's the lot in front of this one-story home?
The tan home on the left is lot number 60. That's the one that's behind lot.
Yeah. So it's basic the lot in front near this pole here, I guess, that we're talking about removing the restriction. And there happens to be a one-story home behind in this particular case. So once again, right here, we just talked about it, taking that change to allow two-story home in lot 94 that backs up to his own lot that's part of phase 2 of his subdivision, not one of the other lots that had been there for quite some time before the subdivision went in. With that in mind, he really hadn't intended at the time when he made this voluntary requirement. And I point that out because we do have a infill standard, and that did occur on phase 1 of Northwoods, and that was an actual ordinance requirement that the infill lots be subject to, or those lots adjacent to the existing subdivisions be subject to the infill standards. And the infill standards make it very difficult to do 2 stories, but doesn't prohibit it. It makes a step-up height standard so that the second story is a greater distance away from those adjacent homes, but doesn't actually restrict the 2-story height requirement. So that's basically why in this case we're indicating that this was a voluntary requirement, just blank, no 2-story homes. So we already talked about the homeowner right behind agreeing. So basically with those types of things that were presented by the applicant, and staff agrees that those things seem to bear true, we didn't find any reason why you couldn't consider this minor modification. And so staff did actually recommend that you could certainly approve this minor modification to take away the restriction to build only a single-story home, allowing the 2 stories that those lots that weren't part of the condition have within this phase of the development. Any questions about the facts around this one?
Any questions, guys?
None for me.
So does the applicant come forward now and testify, Brian?
Open up for a public hearing and then have the applicant come up.
Still don't need to quasi.
Well, not a public hearing, but take public input.
Okay, we'll take public input. Would the applicant please come forward? State your name and address, please.
Good evening, I'm Kurt McLeod, one of the partners of the Northwood Development. I live at 1120 Northwest 12th Avenue in Canby. So as Brian mentioned, this was an oversight on my part. This was 13 years ago that we prepared the master plan for all 4 phases and quantified these lots. These lots that were designated to be single-story, I think, was more restrictive than an infill requirement. And it was through our several neighborhood meetings where we volunteered to the existing homes along Birch Street and Northwest 12th that we would limit our houses to single-story. I think at the time there was discussion about height limitation. My understanding was privacy is the main reason we wanted to do single-story. One of the concerns that have come up since is height. People build new houses now. It surprises me. The houses that I built 40 years ago were the 412 pitches, but now we're seeing 10-12 pitches and 12-12 pitches. So even a single-story home gets up to be 30 feet tall. So a little digression there, but so what we're asking for is we have sold this lot to Mr. and Mrs. Toth that are behind us, and they had proposed to put a 2-story home on this lot. So Brian and I have talked about this lot before. We had another buyer earlier that we rejected the 2-story, said you couldn't do it. And so we had anticipated we were walking down the path. It was marketed as a single-story. We went down the path, and when Roger came to me with the plan, it was 2-story. So we decided we just would come to you and ask for approval to put a 2-story on this lot. There's a plan for a 2-story on lot 95 also. And then the lot behind 95, lot 61, has a two-story that you saw in the photograph, that gray house. So with that, any questions, anything that I can offer?
Any questions from you guys, from the commissioners? Can Brian, let's see, the red star there, that's the proposed,
This is the lot to take the restriction off of.
and where are the old houses there,
They
Brian?
start the next one right in here. So this house would be one of the old ones, and so typically, that's why this lot has a restriction,
Oh, okay.
and these along here to protect these particular homes.
And I have met and worked with most all of those homeowners. In fact, all the fences that you see, we paid for portions, or we paid for all of the fences, all the wood fences around this entire development. I see one property owner here that built his own fence. We tried to help him financially a little bit, but he did by far the majority of the work. But other than that, we've worked with all the neighbors, trying to be good neighbors. We think our development's a good addition to Northwest Canby.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So are there any proponents for this development, for this change? None? How about any opponents? Okay, sir, would you step forward and give your name, address, and please keep it 5 minutes or under.
Oh yeah, it shouldn't take that long. So here I have a copy for the record. And unfortunately, I didn't bring enough for everybody, but I at least brought one for the chair and vice chair. Who wants the other one? You want the other one?
Take it and share.
Wait, did I give you guys too many?
Got two, I think.
And keep your own,
Oh, I need one.
here, just
Oh, I'll give it back.
give it back to us.
So my name is Jason Patton. I live at 1040 North Birch Street here in Canby. And so I'm just going to read from you this letter that I prepared so I keep my thoughts sort of on track. So, dear commissioners, many years ago when the Northwoods development was voted on by the citizens of Canby, one of the stipulations was that certain lots were to be limited to one-story homes. As I understand it, this was in an effort to minimize the impact of this new development on existing homes built decades ago. One might say this was one of the reasons the annexation passed. My home borders one of these properties. Not this particular property, but my home borders property number 87 that you see on your map there. When I considered purchasing my home 7 years ago, one of the things I researched was the impact Northwoods may have on this particular home. That's when I was made aware by the city of the one-story restriction on some of these lots, in particular the lot behind me. The fact a one-story home would be built behind me was one of the reasons I purchased my home. Now that restriction is under threat of being reversed all these years later. Now regarding to this application, I am able to see this from the perspective or from the viewpoint of the petitioner. However, the fact of the matter is this lot is still somewhat adjacent to an existing property on Northwest 12th Avenue. Also, the homes next to it on lot 60 and 93 are one-story homes. Those individuals purchased those lots and built or bought those homes from a builder with the understanding that the home on lot 94 would adhere to the same restriction. To change the rules now would be unfair to those individuals. When lot number 94 was purchased, the purchasers were aware or should have been aware of the restriction on this particular property. If they wanted to build a two-story home, there were other lots available within the development that they could have chose to purchase. What this comes down to is trust and precedence. The community around the Northwoods development trusted that the stipulations originally agreed upon would be followed. Now that trust has been betrayed. I say has been betrayed because the individuals who purchased lot number 75, which is adjacent to the lot I mentioned I am located behind, completed the construction of a home with a second story. While the plans claim it is a storage room, I have it on good authority that it has actually been finished off as a bonus room including a closet. There are other lots with the one-story restriction. One of these lots, as I've mentioned several times, is behind me. If you authorize the change for this lot, what is to stop the owners of the other lots from making a similar request? To that end, what is the point of even having rules and restrictions if they are not to be adhered to? I ask that you show the citizens of Canby your sound judgment tonight and deny this application. Please send a message that the codes that the city puts in place are to be followed. Thank you for your time and patience this evening. I appreciate being able to provide my comments on this application. Thank you.
Any questions? I have a question. You're on 87?
I'm sorry, what?
You're in 87?
No, I am behind
right
87,
in
so
here.
where that red cursor
Oh,
is.
you're there, right? Is that a one-story in 87?
My home is a one, yes, it was built in 1969.
What about 87?
Well, there's no home there yet.
That's going to be a one-story though, right?
Well, it's supposed to be a one-story.
Okay.
This request doesn't change that. It's only for the start.
So all of them will be one-story except for 94 if we change it.
Well, and that's why I said in my statement that there is a precedence that's starting to go down the road here, you know, and that is my fear, is that if individual property owners are able to put in an application to have that restriction removed, what is to stop others people, for instance, lot, 88, 89, and so on and so forth, to say, well, why I want to build a two-story home now, why don't I come in and request a similar restriction change?
Understand. Thank you.
Okay?
And you say lot 75 has got 2 stories on it, but it's only supposed to have
Well,
one
it's
story?
not, so there's some debate on this. It's classified as a storage room. When the house started to be constructed, and, Kirk and I have kind of been around the gate on this one, but when they were constructing it, as I was watching them build it, they put the framing for an actual second story on that house. Now, the windows for it do not face my neighbors who are behind lot 75 there on North Birch Street. And we were told, because I was helping my neighbors with this whole process, because I've worked with the city before, and they trusted me to help them out with this, that it was simply a storage room, that it was not actually a second floor. However, when the house was under construction, I was offered the ability to go in and take a look at it, and what concerned me was that there was a closet framed in and there was a door framed in to block it off from the rest of the attic space that was also storage. So it was essentially, the city did admit that the application should not have been approved and sent to the county for that house to be built. And what they essentially did was went to my neighbors and said, if you don't want them to do this, you could tell them to essentially make a modification to that home. But my neighbors, being decent people, did not, the house already had a roof on it, right? And so they said, well, it's fine, we'll just deal with it. But now the fact that it is actually finished off as an actual second-story room just enrages me even more about the whole process. And so that is why I am here with my concern that we are now considering setting another precedent that could change all the other lots as well.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Any rebuttal?
Just a few comments. I don't know if you know the history of this property, but there was no annexation for this ever. So this was inside the city limits for the last 25 years, but it was outside the urban growth boundary, which is very unique. So it was a long process to get approval. We started in about 1989, got our first approval in about 2005, I think was the first phase we were able to develop. I have spoken with, I know all the people along Birch Street, so Janice Senor lives in the lot that would be kitty corner from lot 94, which she has not had any problem with that. We had to adjust her property line because a lot of those, White River is building on lot 93. They've built probably one of the larger number of all over the homes in our 3 phases thus far, so we get along very well with White River. Lot 75, well, one other comment first. When Jason talked about the logic for approval, the logic for requesting this modification tonight is simply because the guidelines that we offered don't apply to Lot 94. They apply to all these other lots that had single-story homes behind them. So the reason we were asking for modification was because Lot 94 has one of our lots behind it. It didn't have an existing home behind it. So this same logic that we're asking for approval wouldn't apply to any other lot. Most all of the others are sold, and most of them have construction underway already. When he mentioned the point of regulation, he said, what's the point of having regulation? I just want to remind you that this was something we volunteered. This wasn't a regulation. This is something we offered. So in hindsight, it created problems. And that existing, all those lots that we've provided, at least along Northwest 12th, there was, because of the way it was farmed for the tree farm, there's probably a 3-foot ledge between those existing homes on 12th and our lots. So there's already a natural high point between those 2 lots, which is unique. Now, I apologize for bringing you lot 75 back to you, but I anticipated that might come up. So I brought a little handout I'd like to show you. I've colored in the room that's in question. So I apologize for being in a situation to bring you into this, and I apologize also for having a neighbor who is offended by the development. Brian and I have talked about this for a couple of years now, because when we did the CC&Rs originally for phase 3, we called out that all of these homes had to be single story or story and a half. So the definition of a story and a half is when the ceiling rafters begin at the top of the first floor wall. So a story and a half would be if you put a window on a gable, like just a ridge and the gable, you put a window on that, that becomes a story and a half if there's a room upstairs. Or if you put a dormer, so you see a lot of homes with dormers on them. Those are all story and a half homes. But the requirement we put in the CC&R was that all these homes had to be single story or story and a half. And if they were story and a half, they were not allowed to have any windows that faced the existing lots. So I think that part of the problem with lot 75 is that it's been misinterpreted as a 2-story. It's clearly a story and a half. The roof line begins at the top of the first floor. And even if that storage room, which I've highlighted on this drawing, if that storage room was eliminated, it would not reduce the elevation of the peak of the house. And I feel badly about the peak elevation. Those are things that really stand out. When you drive down Birch Street, you see this house on lot 75 that really stands above single-story homes along Birch Street. But that's back again to that design modification that they do now. All the homes seem to have very steep pitches. So if you have a house that's 45 feet wide and he goes up at a 12-12 pitch, he's got another 20 feet in his attic that's unused. So we've always we promote story and a half because we want them to take advantage, use that space that's up there. It doesn't make any difference from the view from the lots behind these houses because the windows don't ever face those lots. Now, one thing that also causes some confusion on lot 75 is that there's one dormer that faces lot 76, and it's got 2 windows that face 76, and that's in that storage room on the upper floor. I hate to call it a second floor, but on the story and a half in the attic space. There's also a false dormer that faces south, and there's a false dormer that faces north. But when you drive by and look at that house, it's very tall, it's got a lot of attic space, and it's got windows on 3 sides on the second floor. But it's actually just a story and a half with 1 real dormer and 2 false dormers to give the appearance of a 2-story home. This plan was designed by Alan Mascord, and this day and age, making modifications to home plans, it doesn't happen randomly during construction. Changes require 2 weeks of turnaround with the structural engineers, so it's not something that happened during construction. So this was planned from day one to have this storage room upstairs. All it has is a stairway with a door going up to it. It's all it does. It goes up to this one room, as you can see on the plan. I may add, too, that Brian and I have talked about this for 2 years since we did the CC&Rs. Brian has always been apprehensive about allowing this. This has been a concern of Brian, so it's not something that Brian was fully on board. But I encouraged him because the appearance of the house is no different. So from the existing homes, the appearance of the house is no different. In this house in particular, if you look at that, you see the ridge line is another 2 or 3 feet higher than where this dormer is. So the dormer that goes off to the east is lower than the ridge for the single-story component of the house. So I feel badly to have a neighbor who's upset about this. We've worked hard to get along with all the neighborhood, but I do think that this has been misinterpreted. I truly believe it's just straight a story and a half. Again, an easy way to understand what that is if the rafters begin at the top of the first floor wall, and that's what this does. All the way around it does that.
Any questions, commissioners? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Vice Chair Boatright, I forgot to indicate that we did get one other letter. This is from the owner of Lot 62, right here where the cursor is. And I emailed back to him and had a response back. I actually...
63.
This, yeah, Steve
63.
Hermeyer. Is he in 63? Whoops. So down here. I'm just wrong place here again. He had some initial concerns in an email that he sent to staff, and it was basically more so of the idea of kind of along the lines Jason was indicating here of just varying requirements. He's had some experience in that in a previous neighborhood he was in and just wasn't too happy with the idea of their standards, and you should follow the standards, and varying those could potentially lead to lowering the quality of life in a neighborhood, et cetera. And after I responded to him that it wasn't actually a code requirement, but a voluntary condition that was made a requirement of the subdivision by the Planning Commission with approval of that voluntary condition, that they only be one story. He didn't seem to have any real problems with it at that time. He made no further comments. So just thought I'd put that in the record for you as well.
Thank you, Brian. So, should we proceed to a vote then on this? If there are no questions from the commissioner?
Yeah, I'd say you'd see if there's any further discussion and see if anybody wants to
Any
make a
further
motion.
discussion? Do I have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion, Mr. Vice Chair, that we approve the modification for SUB 17-01, mod 18-01.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 The motion passes for SUB 17-01, modification 18-01. You're welcome. Okay, so this is the next one will be a public hearing, which
That's
is a
right.
quasi-judicial.
That's right.
Okay, we have a public hearing for Clark Piedmont DR 18-02/CUP 18-01. Since this is a quasi-judicial public hearing, I have to read this. The matter presently before the hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify in this matter, please fill out the public testimony card and give to the recording secretary. At the appropriate time, when your name is called, please step forward to the microphone, state your name, address, and interest in the matter. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. You may be limited by time for your presentation. Generally, the applicant will have a total of 15 minutes to speak. The proponents will be given 5 minutes each, and the opponents will be given 5 minutes each. And those thought to be neutral on the matter will also be given 5 minutes. The applicant will then have 10 minutes for rebuttal. All questions must be directed through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access and to become a part of the record. All written testimony received for both for and against prior to the hearing shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained as indicated in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or the applicable land use regulations which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to the issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government to respond to the issue may preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Everyone present is encouraged to testify, even if it is only to concur with the previous testimony. At this time, I would ask that any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest to please indicate that nature and the extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from the hearing the present matter. None. Ex parte contact. Also, if any member of the hearing body has had any ex parte contact with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and extent of such contact at this time. Does any member of the audience have any questions for any commissioner regarding conflict of interest or ex parte contact? Public hearing format. The public hearing will be conducted as follows. The staff report, questions, if any, by the hearing body or staff, open public hearing for testimony, applicant not more than 15 minutes, proponents not more than 5 minutes each, opponents not more than 5 minutes each, neutral not more than 5 minutes each, rebuttal by the applicant not more than 10 minutes. We'll close the public testimony and there'll be questions, if any, by the hearing body, discussion and deliberation by the hearing body, no additional testimony unless specifically allowed by the chair. A decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure outlined for this hearing? Okay, I'd like to go to the public hearing for Clark Piedmont. So we go to the staff report.
Okay. Up here on the slide gives you the location out in the Canby Pioneer Industrial Park. It's on the bend in the road of Hazeldale, which goes both east-west and north-south. This is a vacant tract today in this area. Just to the north, there's developing Reimers flex space, industrial space, that was before the Planning Commission is developing in this area. And part of their requirement to the north was to share a driveway with the property to their north and with the property to their south. Thus, the site plan that you'll see for this development, they have a shared driveway on the northern boundary out to Hazeldale, shared half and half. And we requested in the pre-application conference that they explore also sharing a driveway with the adjacent property to the west. And that property owner did agree to a shared arrangement. And so you'll see that there's going to be a shared driveway there as well. And the primary reason for pushing for that is that we have a 200-foot spacing between driveways in the industrial park on certain designated collector streets, which Hazeldale is one of those. So that reduces traffic conflict points on the industrial road by lessening the number of driveway accesses that come out, and provides, actually can work out pretty well for the property owners when you do that. Otherwise, you could end up with driveways really close to each other, and that produces conflicts. This shows you, it's not a very good slide, I'm not sure why it's fuzzy, but this is the site layout for the development. What they're proposing is to develop this about a 2-acre site in 2 phases, with phase 1 including this 12,000 square foot building here, and the northern 3,000 square feet of it is a lease space. And the other, I believe, is the Clark Product future home. And then this building down here on the south edge is another, forget how many square feet that is, a little bit bigger. There's a total of 25,000 square feet being proposed on the site in these 2 different phases. So they haven't indicated currently when they might develop this second phase, but the idea is to review and approve the entire site plan at this point. So they're sizing all the drainage and water quality facilities with a big one out here towards the front near Hazeldale in a manner that will accommodate development of the whole site. By looking at this, you can see the shared driveway in this location, and then another shared driveway with the dark line representing the property line. So you can see the driveway is half and half on each side. And I think a condition of the neighboring property owner to this was to make the driveway a little bit wider than what we try to do today. We have 2 conflicting standards in our code right now. At some point, we'll get that corrected. I think we're still weighing ourselves what the standard should be, but the old standard is a 40-foot wide driveway, and that's what they're proposing out here. And then it narrows as you go into the private area of the lots. This driveway over here is the maximum 36-foot wide, which is our new standard that we adopted in 2012. But we did not change the standard in our existing ordinance yet, so we're giving them that 40-foot drive. We also gave an industrial development next to the Sequoia Apartments out on Sequoia Drive. There's a new industrial building going in there where the new bus barn is. And they have a 40-foot drive as well, in fairly new development. Then you see the parking area that's indicated, and they exceed the minimum parking standards and what they're proposing. They also meet the landscape requirements. If you read the staff report, it indicates that they've met our design matrix requirements for points that helps assure that we're getting a reasonable quality development. They're using the typical development material for the structures with tilled up concrete type walls. So it's going to match what's out there in the industrial park quite well. They're required to put the sidewalk improvements along the frontage, so they have that planned. And I think that's about the main thing. Made note that there was a traffic impact study performed. That study indicated, other than the shared driveway issue, which they've complied with, that there wasn't any need for any mitigation to take place. What was the other? They did indicate, and I believe we've made a condition of approval, that prior to occupancy, that we double check at each of those driveways to make sure site distance is being maintained with nothing higher than 2.5 feet in the site distances as you try to exit a driveway. Make sure that we don't get any signs placed in those areas or anything that would block the vision at those. It's always best to try to check that near occupancy to make sure of that. So that's the traffic plan, all that came out of that. We talked about the shared drive. The other thing I haven't mentioned yet is there, some of this space, since they don't know who's going to occupy it, the lease space and the second phase of the development, they applied for a conditional use permit. Our code currently says that if you are not assured that they're going to meet 12 employees per acre, which would mean 24 employees for a 2-acre site, then the code requires you to apply for a conditional use permit, which gives you some discretion to decide if this use is appropriate, since one of our primary goals in the industrial park is jobs creation. And the applicant's narrative and staff fully supports that this is a very typical type development that our industrial park has. We think there's a high chance that we're going to get some good job creating uses to go into these proposed buildings. They may not achieve the 12 units per acre, but our city council has already indicated that they view that as a aspiration and not a strict standard. Staff actually asked to reduce or eliminate that standard. They decided to keep it in as an aspiration. The goal being that we do not want to see 100,000 square foot warehouses that have one employee with a forklift. And so there is a limit, you know, as to what we will accept. But I think this is right in the mainstream of what's being proposed in the park. And I'd say at least 50% of the uses do not meet the 12 employees per acre that we have in the park. Here's kind of a rendition of what the buildings will look like. There was one condition of approval that we indicated can result in a change at the construction stage to just locate where the bicycle parking spaces are going to be. I think this was the one. I start getting so many, we've got so many applications, I can't remember which condition goes to which now. Let's see. They did not place a sign on this particular, so that's going to come later. So we've got a condition of approval that they meet our sign ordinance code requirements. And in our industrial park, we do not allow pole signs, but of course there are wall signs and the possibility of a monument sign that could go out near the street if they so desire. And we had 0 public input. We did have one letter submitted by our city engineer, the April 30th memo that has some technical requirements that they'll need to follow during the construction phase of their plans. And I mentioned the final revised site plan showing the bicycle spaces. So any questions about this staff report?
Questions?
Are there going to be any large trucks, semis loading or unloading, or bay doors, or?
They do have 2 loading bays indicated, and so they do plan some. Again, most of the space is unknown, who the occupants are going to be at this time, but the code does require the loading bays. So they've satisfied that requirement.
The applicant, please.
Hello, my name is Eric DeBryan with Green Box Architecture. We're located at 1300 John Adams Street, Oregon City. And I'm the one in the firm that has the most intimate knowledge of this project, and I can speak a little bit more about what we're proposing on this site. I think Brian did a really good job at kind of encapsulating what we're doing at the macro level here on site. We are proposing, we do have parking spots, just to let you know, they're on the lower side there. I'm gonna see if I can get this thing to work, if that's okay with you guys, get a laser pointer going, see if I can do this. So yeah, so this building right here is the building that is phase 1. That is 12,000 square feet. A majority of that will be a storage space for large bulk spices. Currently what they do is they distribute proprietary spices for food service all through the greater Portland metro area. And so the basic functionality of what they're wanting to do is have a 2-story storage system with a single forklift and forklift driver and a floor manager and a handful of office personnel to what we're thinking about 7 maximum employees for that space for the 7,000 square foot portion. This line right here that I'm trying to be steady with, right there, and below and south, will be the 3,000 square foot portion that will be leased out at a later time. We have a demising wall in there for that. And we have ample parking. We will have ample bike parking at this point. That phase 2 will come in at a later date, potentially. We do have our signage on deferred submittal right now, just because they don't fully know what they want to do with their signage, but we're gonna cross that bridge a little bit later. To answer your question about loading vehicles, they do anticipate a typical 53-foot trailer once in a while. It's not very common, but this area right here that I'm circling right here at the laser pointer, that is an at-grade loading dock, meaning at this area right here, it's about 4 feet down for a 53-foot truck to be able to back in there and pull out and drive this way. So we're proposing that this access here is kind of a one-way, and the larger trucks, we can kind of segregate the larger shipment vehicles, box trucks and larger trucks over here, while keeping the more pedestrian vehicles over here for parking. Yeah, and this shared driveway access is actually is in production now. It's being built now. So we were very fortunate to be able to get the engineering for that and to merge our site plan with what's being built now. So we feel really comfortable that condition's going to be met. We recently found out that this portion right here, there's an existing curb here, and we've added an accessibility ramp right here for this proposed sidewalk that runs all the way to the south and on the east side of the lot. And we have a landscaping plan in hand. All stormwater will be handled and mitigated on site. This portion here, this densely hatched area is a large on-site bioswale that has been engineered by a civil engineer. As well as a series of dry wells that have been placed on site. So that's also been submitted for. We have a single trash enclosure right here. We don't anticipate a lot of waste, whether in any way going out. A lot of the product that they have, they just store it, reduce it down in size, and ship it on out. And that's the bulk of their business. So, and that's the majority of what I have to add to this.
Any questions, commissioners? What's your landscaping? Is that grass or?
Yeah, the majority of that will be grasses. We do have, we followed the landscaping guide and have a landscape architect that has produced a plan for this as well. More decorative around. We're trying to observe a vision clearance here, but there will be minor shrubs here, and we're going to try to think through what the signage really wants to be and what it needs to be as far as code is concerned, per their needs at a later time. So that's kind of what's up in the air.
Thank you. I think that's all, if the commissioners don't have any questions. Thank you. Are there any opponents for this? No opponents? Okay, well, I guess we'll put it to a vote then. Proponents. Proponents. Go ahead. Come on. You're opponent or proponent? Opponent. Oh, come forward then. And do I have your name up here?
Yes, you should.
Jim Langham?
No, Bob Cameron.
Oh, Bob. Okay, thank you, Bob.
No problem.
State your name and address, please.
Sure. My name is Bob Camera. I live at 1338 North Maple here in Canby. The reason why I'd like to speak against this plan is because I don't believe you have adequate information to really talk about the traffic mitigation problems. If you look at the table that is provided and the traffic study that was done, they speak about the number of trips that this new building and complex will add to the Hazeldale roadway. But it does not give you any ground level or number of traffic that is currently occurring on Hazeldale. So you don't have a baseline to decide what the 100 extra trips or so will be increasing the problem or not, because you have no idea what the present situation on that roadway is. The traffic study is inadequate in that area. So for you to be able to decide that there is no need for traffic mitigation seems to be impossible. I think you should presently delay your decision until the traffic study is amended to provide you with that data so that you can better provide an understanding about what is the future for Trafficdale and its roadway and its impact.
Any questions? Commissioners? There was a traffic study done, right, Brian?
There was.
And it
It's in
didn't.
your packet. It's 4 pages. And there's a chart in here that talked about the vehicle trip estimations.
Yes. Page 2 of the traffic study. But if you look at it, the only statement that is in effect on page 1 where the engineer says, trust me. There's not this will all be okay. But he doesn't give you the data in which he based that statement on. Is he saying that presently that particular highway has 500 cars that pass by there so that you know in adding another 100 to this collector street is not going to be a problem? Or is there 2 million cars going by there on a daily basis and 100 will create a massive problem? You just do not know. So I question whether you can accept this traffic study or make a decision that there shouldn't be traffic mitigation.
I think he brings up a reasonable point in that I think he's correct. They don't say anything about existing traffic counts. And one of the reasons they probably don't is because, as you know, DKS is the firm that actually did our transportation system plan. So they have a much broader knowledge of Canby's road system, and they have that in their computer models. And when they adopted the transportation plan, they did both a near-term and a build-out analysis of our industrial park. And so they have knowledge of the streets within the industrial park being designed and able to handle the expected traffic with build-out of the industrial park, with the exception of needing another means of access to the highway. And so that's what our transportation plan says, is that generally speaking, yes, the traffic volumes may get greater as we near build-out, and way before build-out, we need another access point to the highway, or Sequoia 99E, and Hazeldale and Sequoia are going to be overwhelmed. And so we're working on that additional means of finding that additional means of access at this point. But in terms of the streets, they were sized to handle the industrial park and are meant to have high volumes of traffic, et cetera. And so I'm not a traffic engineer, but that would be my guesstimate as to why they didn't provide and take actual traffic counts for the streets in this particular study.
Thank you, Brian. Any of the commissioners have any questions?
I would agree with Brian that when this industrial park was developed, that there was a traffic study done at that time to look at future build-out and to design the roadway system such that it would handle the peak traffic flow, so that when it's fully built out, it is capable of handling the flow of traffic that is anticipated to occur when the park is fully built out.
Glad you can have that crystal ball, which I don't have. I only deal with data. What is the traffic situation at this point in time? And that's traffic studies. I've seen this several times with developments. They provide traffic studies and they don't provide the adequate data for somebody to make a good decision. And I think you guys should all be requiring them to provide the data that is really clear so that you can make a good decision. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have a proponent, Susan Myers. State your name and address, please.
Good evening. My name's Susan Myers. I live at 1590 North Ponderosa Street in Canby. I'm here in part to represent Piedmont Group. We are the current property owner, and we would be selling to Clark Products. So this is Clark Products design. I wanted to speak to you because as a citizen in the community, I served on the Citizen Advisory Committee for the Transportation System Plan the last time we modified it. So we got to work with DKS. We saw the large model that they use throughout the city where they, so that each time a property is developed in town, like this one, they consider the impact of this particular use on the overall model. So it's a massive model with all these little cars moving around. They've done traffic counts on roads. It's that is why we all need to hire DKS to do the traffic study. We're not able to just go out and hire anyone on the street. If we disagree with DKS, then we could get somebody else. But the reality is, another consultant, to also do a traffic study. But the reality is there's very little traffic on this road right now. The industrial park is in its early stages of development. It is, I think any of us who have been in the area know that there's just not a lot of traffic on this road. And to hold up this application because you don't have the numbers seems a little short-sighted. And that it is the city's engineer that has done the work and is advising you that there's no mitigation required. I hope that's helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any rebuttal from the applicant? We close the hearing, public hearing, and put it to a vote, Brian?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to close the public hearing on this, and I have a motion for approval or disapproval.
Mr. Vice
Motion to
Chair.
approve Clark Piedmont DR 18-02/Cup 18-01 as provided by the staff's recommendations.
Okay, been a motion to approve. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, DR 18-02/CUP 18-01 has been approved. Do we do a final now, Brian, or after
I'd
the
just
meeting?
wait, I'd go through the next public hearing first.
Okay. All right, now we have, this is another quasi-judicial hearing, right?
Yes.
Public hearing on MLP 18-02 of minor land partition of an existing lot on Southwest 8th Place into 2 parcels. This matter presently before the hearing body requires a public hearing. All interested persons in attendance shall be heard on the matter. If you wish to testify on this matter, please fill out the public testimony card and give the recording secretary. At the appropriate time when your name is called, please step forward to the microphone, state your name, address, and interest in the matter. For longer presentations, proponents and opponents may buy time from one another. In so doing, those either in favor or opposed may allocate their time to a spokesperson who will represent the entire group. You may be limited by time for your presentation. Generally, the applicant will have a total of 15 minutes to speak. The proponents will be given 5 minutes each, and the opponents will be given 5 minutes each. Those thought to be neutral on the matter will be given 5 minutes each. The applicant will then have 10 minutes for rebuttal. All questions must be directed through the chair. Any evidence to be considered must be submitted to the hearing body for public access and to become a part of the record. All written testimony received both for and against prior to the hearing shall be summarized by staff and presented briefly to the hearing body during the staff report. Testimony and evidence must be directed toward the applicable review criteria contained as indicated in the staff report, the comprehensive plan, or the applicable land use regulations which the person believes to apply to the decision. Failure to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the decision maker and the parties an opportunity to respond to that issue may preclude appeal to the Land Use Board of Appeals based on that issue. Failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the local government to respond to the issue may preclude an action for damages in circuit court. Everyone present is encouraged to testify, even if it is only to concur with previous testimony. At this time, I would like to ask that any member of the hearing body who has a conflict of interest to please indicate the nature and extent of the conflict and whether you intend to participate in or abstain from hearing the present matter. Also, if any member of the hearing body has had any ex parte contact with anyone prior to this hearing, including a visit to the site, please declare the nature and the extent of such contact at this time.
By the site.
Thank you.
I drive by it daily as well.
Does any member of the audience have any questions for any commissioner regarding conflict of interest or ex parte contact? The public hearing will be conducted as follows. Staff report, questions, if any, by the hearing body or staff. Open public hearing for testimony. Applicant, not more than 15 minutes. Proponents, not more than 5 minutes. Opponents, not more than 5 minutes. Neutral, not more than 5 minutes. That's each. Rebuttal by applicant, not more than 10 minutes. We'll close the public testimony and there will be questions from the hearing body. A discussion and deliberation by the hearing body. No additional testimony unless specifically allowed by the chair. A decision shall be made by the hearing body at the close of the hearing, or the matter will be continued to a date certain in the future. This will be the only notice of that date you will receive. Does anyone have any questions about the procedure outlined for this hearing? Brian?
Okay, thank you. Here we have the property in question, which is indicated to be at 115 Southwest 8th Avenue. There is an existing home on the northern end of this property in this area. It has access out onto 8th Avenue, and we have South Ivy running along this part of the property in question. They're taking this existing lot, which has 17,000 plus square feet of space in a R1 low-density residential zone. And the desire is, because of the placement of the existing home at the northern end of the property, is to try to somewhat divide it in half to see if they can create an additional buildable parcel that would conform with the zoning standards between 7,000 and 10,000 square feet in size, and provide a means of access and make any necessary improvements that would be needed that's normally associated with a partition on both of the existing tracks. There's an aerial showing you the same property and the location of that existing house. You can see where that driveway is located. I believe that it's going into a garage area here. The area in the back here is where you'll have a new potential home site when they divide the property. There's a survey in here that shows that. Access, probably easiest to see even on this, is proposed actually to come from 8th Avenue along the west property boundary between the house and the property line. And as you can see, there's a neighboring house that's fairly close to that property line as well, to provide access. And the reason for that is that this is Ivy, South Ivy is an arterial road. Whenever you have an alternative means of access, our code requires that you do not provide access onto an arterial street because its main purpose is through traffic, to get it traffic through the community as efficiently as possible without conflicts, which driveways cause on an arterial road. So that's resulted in the proposed access coming out to 8th Avenue between on the west side of the house. This is the survey that was provided for the property. We asked the applicant to make sure they have a survey so that we would know the exact distance between the existing wall of the home and the adjacent property line, and they say that that's 12.5 feet. So I guess it's 12 foot 6 inches. And that just so happens that the minimum driveway width at the curb is 12 foot. And our ordinance requirements generally require that you pave back a minimum of 20 feet. And generally, you pave the entire length of your driveway when you do these partitions and things. So one of the issues that came up with this case, and it was raised by some of the public input that we have as well, is that parcel 2, which is the vacant tract to be created to the south, is likely to be subject to our residential infill standards. Those standards, again, are by definition of when you have 2 existing homes that are 5 years or older that are within 25 feet of the lot that's being created, then you want to try to help the compatibility with whatever houses you might have existing in that area. And if they're 1 story, then we should impose the residential infill standard requirement. And if they're proposing a 2-story house, have a step-up height requirement to help set the 2nd story further away from those adjacent homes that might be 1 story. And so we didn't analyze whether they're 1 story or not at this point. That's something we'll have to do at the building permit stage. We made a condition of approval to evaluate whether it is an infill lot at the time of a building permit. There's always a possibility of an easement being needed along the streets, both Southwest 8th Avenue and or Ivy Street. So we'll confirm that at the time of a building permit as well. At this point, no one has indicated a utility easement is necessary, but we never completely trust that until the construction stage, so we just kind of standard put this condition of approval on. If a utility service agency says they need it, then before we let that plat get filed of record for the partition, then that utility easement will be shown on there. At that time, they'll have one more chance to review the plat and determine if they need a utility easement or not. The driveway is probably the biggest issue with this particular request. And to staff, it's a practical issue. We technically don't believe it's a code issue, and the reason is we initially, at the pre-app, thought that maybe this was a flag lot, but by definition, we do not believe it's a flag lot, because the definition says that a flag lot would not have any adequate street frontage. It doesn't say whether you actually have access to the street, but that you have frontage. And so when I think of a flag lot, all the flag lots we've done for years and years, you've got an arm that leads behind a house, but there's no street access behind that house. This one happens to have a lot of frontage on South Ivy. It just can't take access to that street. Therefore, we don't believe it's a flag lot. And that actually is an important consideration because there's only basically 12 foot between the property line and the wall of the house, just enough room for a regulation width driveway to pass between and provide access to that lot in the rear that can't take access to the arterial street. However, with a potential paved driveway, inches from the wall of the house and from the aerial, very close to the neighboring property's house, who may or may not be 7 foot, which is the normal side yard setback from the property line. There's some assumption that they're 7 foot away from that property line. We're not positive of that. We don't know how old that house might be and whether it met those normal setback requirements. It looked like it was approximately that. But you put this driveway, not that it's going to be a high volume, it's going to be a rather normal or smaller size house that would be built. But the cars are going to be going between these two homes. And I say that for full disclosure because if it was a flag lot with a existing home, there is a requirement that the proposed driveway be a minimum of 5 feet from the wall of the house. But since it's not a flag lot, it's just an access easement providing, and we don't have any requirement for that when it's not determined to be a flag lot. So it does kind of promote the idea that the applicant has indicated to us she'd like the extra remuneration to be able to create another lot, sell that lot, may also eventually sell the existing house that she owns as well. So there could be, at some point in the future, a new house and a new owner to the existing house. But the current owner of the property feels comfortable in proposing this partition and technically meets all the requirements with the access easement provided and having adequate frontage on Ivy, that we do not believe it's deemed to be a flag lot. It's an unusual situation, one that took some extra thought on staff's part and some debate on the particular issue, because we are somewhat concerned about the practical idea of a driveway being so close to the wall of a house. Another issue that came up on this is the improvements that you usually require on a minor partition. Ivy Street and the frontage that both tracks have along Ivy, that is in the hands of Clackamas County currently. They submitted for the record a memorandum that 2 or 3 pages of requirements. But the biggest requirement in there was for sidewalk improvements and potential street improvements along South Ivy for adjacent to this, both parcels of this subdivision. We contacted the county shortly after they turned in that memorandum and found out that they were not aware of the $2.3 million project that's already funded and ready to move forward sometime in the late this year and or next year, that will be putting in sidewalks and street improvements and drainage improvements from the highway down to nearly 13th Avenue. Once they found that out, they submitted a supplemental memo for the record. I'm trying to figure out where I put that. That basically said that they were withdrawing the requirements of their previous memo, just condition number 4. So in our recommendation, I think it's condition number 6, on the very end of that condition, we need to add except for condition number 4 of the county's recommendation, because they're no, which is A through C, they're not recommending that any improvements be required of this partition because it's already secured, the funding's there, and it's better that they don't try to build anything now, or it wouldn't work with the overall project that's going to be engineered and is already the funding's there for it. So that's quite a coup for the applicant not to have to worry about that particular item. Just tonight at the meeting, the applicant posed a question to me. Don't know for sure how we should deal with the issue, but for frontage improvements on southwest 8th Avenue, there's a requirement for ADA ramps at the intersection with Ivy, which is most likely to be covered completely by that project, at least within the right-of-way. There may be a small gap to the existing sidewalk that's along 8th. So we don't know if there's going to be a little tiny gap between what the project will do there or whether they'll go just past the right-of-way line and close that gap to an existing sidewalk. There also will be a need for when the driveway is paved and installed, when the house gets built. That's the logical time you would think when a driveway would be created and paved out to 8th Avenue when the house is being built. There'll be a need to redo the ADA ramps where the driveway connects with the street. And I would think that that homeowner could potentially be responsible for that. The applicant is asking that that improvement be tied to whoever buys lot parcel 2 and builds their driveway, that they fix the driveway connection to the street, which will also mean fixing the ADA ramps to that driveway. And that all makes sense to me. I would hope that that's explained to whoever that lot is sold to, that they've got that requirement to pave the driveway and to make that connection. Are there any questions about this application?
No questions? No questions, Brian.
Oh, I'm sorry. There were 2 other public inputs that I'm not sure that you guys have at your, so I'm going to read these 2 to make sure that you are aware of this public input. We got quite a few here at the very last. One of them is from Julie Helms, and it looks like this, so I don't think you guys have this one.
I have a letter from her.
So you've got,
Probably.
and I think that may have something in addition to what she put on this, because I'd be surprised. We probably need it for the record. But that just came tonight, so I don't know whether it has something in addition or she's reiterating what's in this one. Let me read this real quick. I live right next door to the west Go back up here so you can see this. So you know which lot we're talking about here. She lives over here. I will be out of state on May 14th, but want to express my concerns to the property if a driveway is put in west of parcel 1 between the existing home and my property line. I have an existing fence the length of my property with approximately a 35-year-old dogwood tree and 35-year-old 50 to 75-foot tall pine tree that borders the fence. I'm worried and concerned about the damage to the tree roots and future health of the trees. Also concerned about the potential street parking problems in front of my house and the amount of noise from vehicles so close to 2 bedrooms on my house from the new driveway proposed. I just don't see how there's enough distance between the overhang of the home and my property line to put in a driveway. I would ask that prior to any work that an arborist be consulted and report to show no damage would be done to the condition or health of my trees bordering the east side of my property line. There is also a cherry tree and row of arborvitae trees along the property line. And I'm not sure if I want to read this other one.
That bad?
No, it's not.
Can't, you think I can read this one? Okay. So here's her further letter submitted tonight.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Let's see, the first part's exactly the same. As I stated in my previous comments, I'm seriously concerned about the placement of the driveway between parcel 2, between my home and parcel 1. The map prepared by 45 North Surveying indicates 12 foot 6 inches separates the existing home from my property line, yet there is 38 feet on the east side of the home on parcel 1. So if we go to the survey, she's saying that over here between Ivy and the garage of this home, there's 38 feet here, so why not put a driveway over here that goes back to the other lot? And I can tell you that staff thought about that, and unfortunately, that driveway location would be in violation because you want separation of proposed driveways from a street intersection, especially with an arterial street. So we want the driveway pushed as far away from the arterial street intersection as you can get it. Because if cars are backed up, then nobody could get out that driveway. And as traffic increases over time on 8th Avenue, having a driveway close to the to Ivy would be problematic and basically a violation of our ordinance requirement. With only a 6-inch leeway, if the driveway is put between the home on parcel 1 and my property, the chances of damage to person or property is great. I feel more consideration should be given to the driveway to parcel 2 being placed on the east side of the home of parcel 1. Seems to be the safest option for all 3 parties while still allowing the necessary vision clearance. Also concerns me what the impact of the driveway just a few inches from my property could have on my home value and potential for resale. I have no plans at this time to sell, but I know I would not have bought this property had it had the driveway that is being proposed. If this is approved, I'd ask it be in the deed that a 6-foot rock retaining wall be built between the driveway to parcel 2 and my property at the expense of the builder owner of proposed parcel 2, not only for safety reasons, but to help lower the sound of vehicles from that driveway going by my bedroom windows. Additionally, based on the conditional use for low-density residential, cites the section here and the ordinance in 1616-0202, I strongly hope and urge for a restriction to be put on parcel 2 to be a single-family dwelling, not allowing the development of townhomes or any other development that could end up causing issues with traffic and park. It would also compromise the character of our neighborhood. The staff looked at that particular issue because it was provided in another input that we have that was in your packet. And we don't believe there's any possibility of anything but a single-family home on this particular lot. The code does talk about conditional use could allow a duplex if you had a corner lot that was 10,000 square feet, but that doesn't apply to this. It's not that big, and that you could have a zero lot line type development of some sort if you had a 12,000 square foot size lot, and it doesn't have that either. And if you had a conditional use, then conditional uses are potentially could be deemed incompatible and denied. And so you would have an opportunity to address the issue of something other than a single-family home if somebody applied for a conditional use permit. So I'm not sure it's appropriate to consider conditions on this partition with an R1 zone, and the only outright permitted use is a single-family home. And so we've got two people having concern about what somebody might try to do with a conditional use permit, which I don't think they can even get approval for, that they're fearing. I don't think it's allowed, even with a conditional use permit. So I choose, let's see, she says, I purchased my home, my first and hopefully only one, almost 6 years ago. I chose it because of the quiet, well-established neighborhood, because of the variety of beautiful trees on the property, because of the lot size and the space between properties. Never did I think all of this and my quality of life would change so quickly, out of my control, with a partition. And then there's one other, a short one here from Sally Jo Brown. She, do you have that one? Oh, good. I don't have to read that one then. I think that's it.
Any questions from the commissioners? Brian, what is the minimum width for the driveway?
The driveway
12 foot.
width is 12 foot, and that's at the property line where it connects with the public street. We have a minimum drive width of 12 feet.
There's nothing about up to the...
In a typical flag lot where you have driveways kind of like what we have here going to a new lot behind a house, if the distance back there is no more than 100 feet to the body of the lot, then a minimum 12-foot wide paved drive is required. If it's more than 100 feet, then they require 20 foot of paved drive width. This area is actually 100 and, I think it's 100, I can't see it. It's just over 100. But the thing is, that shouldn't require a 20-foot wide access drive, because there's plenty of frontage, because the only reason for that ordinance requirement is for fire access. They have adequate fire access to fight a fire for a house on that lot from the Ivy Street frontage. Therefore, again, why we don't believe it's a flag lot, because there's no other flag lot I know that has the ability to fight a fire from an arterial street.
Does this driveway require the trays? Is that what you call them?
Oh, the radius or...
Yeah, at the
out
end when it
street.
reaches the street, when it kind of jets out on either side.
Yeah, they just kind of flare up. I mean, usually it's a straight curb that just dips down for the driveway and dips back up, but that makes an extra little bit of width.
So it won't require doing an extra triangle on either side in order to widen that?
There is a sidewalk, and so when they put that driveway in, they're gonna have to make that meet the ADA requirements where where it dips down and goes back up.
There's no room to build a concrete barrier between those two properties with that driveway, is there?
I think that may be true because we're only talking about 6-inch extra, and a rock wall or a brick wall or something's probably going to be 8 to 12 inches or something, I don't know. And so half of it could maybe be on this property and half on the adjacent property, and they might agree to that. So there might just be room. But the issue is that means a pavement right next to the wall of the house on this property that's being partitioned.
I got a question. So the city code requires a minimum 12-foot wide driveway at the property line, is that correct?
Right.
Extended 20 feet back into the property at a minimum distance?
Right.
Beyond that, it could be narrowed up as...
Beyond that, it could be narrowed up in this instance because it's merely an access easement and not a means for fire access.
So it could be narrowed up to allow additional separation or setback from the neighboring property as it typically would in a flag lot situation. Maybe not to the same extent of 5 feet in this case, but several feet, maybe 2-3 feet.
Right. So about 20 feet back, you could narrow it. I don't know what would be appropriate. You could certainly narrow it to 10 feet. And that's, again, unique in this particular case to whatever is an adequate width. I've seen drive-up windows at drive-up facilities that only 9 or 10 feet wide.
Yeah, there's travel lanes that are, 9 feet wide at times. So.
That could facilitate that kind of thing, I would think. At least help protect maybe the roots of the tree a little bit or something like that, and keep it 6 inches from the wall of the house and maybe out from under the eave, because you don't know what kind of truck, a delivery truck, and there's an eave of a house that isn't accounted for.
That's why I think this option is far better.
But that's illegal.
Well, yeah, like moving the driveway towards,
Not cutting a new driveway in, but using the dog leg like here, that would alleviate the neighbor's concern, but still
when is that on?
provide adequate room for that driveway where you're not going to have to worry about a truck hitting the overhang.
That's the one with the driveway between Ivy and the house.
Tying into the existing driveway.
Yeah, I see it.
Brian, this is just for a partition, correct? I mean, they're going to have to, whoever decides to build on here is going to have to go through another,
I mean, there'll be a building permit. I mean, what we have to recognize, though, is that whoever divides property is considered to be a developer. And technically, they're supposed to be the ones responsible for public improvements. And in this case, the only public improvements were along South Ivy and a portion of a sidewalk along Southwest 8th Avenue. Other than that, we're talking about private property development that's going to be associated with whoever builds that house that's in the rear.
If they did put a barrier between, is this not allowed in the code where they wrap it around between Ivy and the house?
Oh, that's just highly unusual to put a driveway to another lot in front of another house, but it could be done.
So it's not,
It's all private.
can be done.
Yeah, it can be done, I would think. I don't know exactly the space there, but I'm assuming that a house is probably 20 feet from the property line. And so that you could put a 10-foot wide drive in front of the existing house, and potentially maybe the driveway that's there could still function. You drive across the other drive that's going in front of it. I mean, it could potentially work.
Unless they've got a car or truck parked in their driveway.
Yeah, that would be the issue, wouldn't it?
Any other questions, commissioners? This is the applicant here. Would you please step forward, state your name, address, please?
My name is Amber Mathieson, and I live at 115 Southwest 8th Avenue, so at the property in question. A couple of things that I would like to address are the placement of the proposed sort of dogleg driveway actually would create a violation of your own code because there's not enough distance between the current driveway and the intersection to create an additional driveway next to it. It also wouldn't allow for a 10-foot distance between driveways and would create a shared driveway situation, which would cause me to not be able to use my garage. So that's why that proposal wasn't considered on my part. The other issue is the orientation of the house that I live in. The the east side has a very large landscaping berm with mature trees all along that east side. So there's about a 6-foot rock and dirt berm, and then some 50, 60-foot fir trees and some other, I don't know what all the trees kinds are, but fir trees and some other trees along that space. So there would be a significant requirement for excavation and removal of trees along that side. You can see
those trees, I guess.
Yeah.
Here.
Brian covered the most of it quite well.
That picture there, do you enter your driveway to the west of your building there or to the north?
My driveway comes
I know your
in from the
driveway
north,
comes
off of
in-
8th.
Comes in off of 8th, but you drive straight into your garage
Yes.
from there?
Looks like a sidewalk going.
That's a
into the front
sidewalk that
door.
comes around to the front of the
okay.
house.
You're gonna have a shared driveway to whether you build a dog leg or not, it looks like.
Yeah, if I would have to share a driveway, and frankly, I park in my driveway. So trying to have someone drive into my driveway and around that's gonna be problematic.
How would you do it the other way?
Well, the other way, they would come in off of 8th. We wouldn't share a driveway at all.
Okay.
And this driveway here, supposedly right here at the property boundary, should be 5 feet from this property boundary, which could be done because then you would angle the driveway back over to the property, near the property boundary, and then potentially narrow it as we were discussing earlier. And then you're supposed to be 10 foot from the other driveway, and we believe that can actually be met. On that street, they only need to be 10 feet apart, and that's why you're 5 feet from this property boundary, because you're assuming the next door neighbor is 5 feet from it.
Do you have an idea how far 20 feet is in off of 8th Street? About where your garage starts or something?
Let me look here and see if it tells me.
There's a dimension on here that's, I can't read it though. I can't blow it up.
Where do you see the dimension at, Brian? I can blow it up on my screen.
It'd be in here somewhere then, because if that's 12 feet, it would have to be in there, right about where the garage.
It says it's 27.2 inches or something, 2 feet.
7 feet to the garage.
That can narrow quite
Yeah, it could narrow down.
before it even hits the existing house.
How far down can you narrow that, Brian? 10
Well, we were
feet
talking
now?
9 or 10 feet. Probably wouldn't want to go much less. I mean, you're never going to meet another vehicle on the drive.
Right.
And, there's also the potential that you could do driveway tire strips. Instead of a paved drive, the full width, you could just do tire paved to keep from, we have one off of Knightsbridge Road that did that recently. That's an allowed code provision. I don't know whether that would be less impactful or not.
Visually, maybe.
What about a wall between your neighbor?
I'm not in favor of a wall between me and my neighbor. My neighbor and I get along well. I don't think that a rock wall is necessary. We have a fence. A single-family home isn't going to be generating the same level of traffic that 8th or even that Ivy is currently generating. I can certainly assure you that we hear every car that goes by on Ivy, and having a car drive between the houses is not going to add to the noise levels that we experience.
Any questions, commissioners?
No, sir.
There's the concern about the trees along the shared property boundary. Where are those trees located? They don't seem to show up on the survey.
Do you have the aerial again?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to, so why is that not moving lane?
Her tree trunks almost touch the fence, so they're right up against the property line.
The trees
and do encroach into my yard.
The trees on your property, on the neighbor's property?
They're on her property, but they hang over the fence and encroach into the yard currently.
Where are they located?
So they are these here.
So there's a current fence.
Tree. This is what she's calling a pine tree. It's actually a fir tree. And then I have a tree here.
Somewhere she said there's arborvitae.
Yeah, this greenery right here is an arborvitae that runs from along her backyard.
And they're inside of her yard, right?
Well, they hang over into my yard now. Constantly trimming them.
Thank you. Are there, y'all done then? Any proponents? Jim, how are you, buddy?
Pretty good. Ain't seen you in a while.
Would you repeat all that, Jim, into the microphone for the record?
I'm Jim Langham, and I live at 140 Southwest 8th. I live catty-cornered from Amber. And one thing, her lot is 17,000 square feet. Mine's 9,100 square feet. So you can see that these lots, there's no rhyme or reason to the size of these lots. And one thing I did want to ask you, you were talking earlier about access from that lot that she wants to divide, not going out onto Ivy, where there are homes that do right down the street and across the street that do access Ivy. So I don't know what the problem would be that way, is just access it right off of Ivy. Is there a requirement?
It's current ordinance standards, and so we can't permit new houses that are in violation of today's ordinances.
Oh, even though that those ones are already out there?
Yeah, I mean, those are old driveways. Current regulations don't allow that.
Oh, okay, I see. I just thought I wanted to bring that up. But, no, like I said, that the lots in that subdivision, there's no rhyme or reason. But that's a double lot. I mean, the requirement is, what is it, 7,000 square feet? That more than covers it. That's all I have to say then.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, how about opponents? Let's see, we have Rayona Taylor.
My name is Regina Taylor. I live at 173 Southwest 6th Avenue. I'm about 2 blocks from this property. I happened to run into Julie Holmes. I didn't know her. I just ran into her. She's the neighbor to the west there. Met her last Friday. She was cleaning her yard, and I was walking the neighborhood and saw the sign in front of the subject property about the land use. And Julie was concerned, and I stopped and talked to her. I Most of what I submitted is the same thing she did. She said she wasn't going to be able to be here tonight, tonight, so I volunteered to show up and make some of her concerns known. I'll go ahead and read my information. I've submitted it, so you've probably already read it, but I'll go quickly. Thank you for the opportunity to express my concerns regarding the minor land partition proposed for 115 Southwest 8th Avenue in Canby, Oregon. I have reviewed the applicant's materials provided in the packet for the May 14th Planning Commission meeting and have a couple of concerns. This request for minor land partition creates 2 lots where currently 1 lot exists. The newly created lot will be considered a flag lot. I have heard Brian's considerations for that, but I'll continue with what I have here, which is defined in Ordinance 1604-318. A flag lot is a lot that does not meet minimum frontage requirements and where access to the public road is by a narrow private right-of-way. The packet includes a diagram from 45 North Surveying LLC, which indicates the lot sizes are 9,900 square feet for parcel 1. Parcel 2 will be about 7,100 square feet, and the total of 1,700 square feet. The location is zoned minimum low density, minimum lot square footage is 7,000, maximum 10,000. I don't see any problem with that. I did the math. I think there's plenty of room for the 2 lots. I will list my 3 concerns in order of increasing importance, leaving the target concern for last. This will allow the council to hear the lesser concerns first, and you'll have them in mind and can incorporate them into the information of concern number 3 more easily. My concern number 1 is the applicant indicates she intends to sell parcel number 2, so it will be developed by someone outside of her control. The use is permitted outright for a newly created lot and includes a single-family dwelling per lot. I do not perceive a problem with an additional single-family dwelling in this neighborhood. A new single-family dwelling would be subject to the infill guidelines with a maximum height of 28 feet tall. And so far, I'm okay with this subdivision at this point. But the conditional uses for low-density residential in Ordinance 1616-020P indicates the potential for the development of a zero-lot line dwelling, provided that the minimum side yard setback shall be 7 feet when adjacent to housing with standard setbacks. The more common term for zero-lot line development is townhouse, and I don't think this lot is suitable for a townhouse. A potential remedy would be is if this application for a minor land partition is approved, I urge imposing a written restriction on parcel number 2 as a single-family dwelling and explicitly not allowing a zero-lot line development or any other development. This would also serve as a method of limiting the amount of traffic on the narrow 12-foot driveway between the 2 existing homes, meaning the one owned by the applicant as well as her neighbor to the west. My second concern. I have a concern with the application of Ordinance 1616-030 development standards, in particular the portion that I will read below. The following subsections indicate the required development standards of the R1 zone. Minimum and maximum lot area, 7,000 square feet, 10,000 square feet is the maximum per single-family dwelling. The maximum lot area standard does not apply to single-family dwellings existing at the time of subdivision or partition approval, and the Planning Commission may approve smaller or larger lots in conformance with subsection B below. Pre-existing legally created lots of record may be considered to be legally buildable and separately saleable, provided they contain at least 5,000 square feet, and further provided that any structures on such lots meet the required setbacks from the lot lines which will result when these lots of records are separated. Lot width requirements may be reduced to a minimum of 50 feet and a side yard setback reduced to a minimum of 5 feet per lot. A potential remedy would be, well, first of all, I question the amount of time that must lapse before a lot is considered a pre-existing. As an example, if this lot is approved as a division today in 2018 and remains for a year, could parcel number 1 later request to subdivide lot number 1, which has 9,900 square feet, nearly the 10,000 square feet needed for 2 separate 5,000 square foot lots to satisfy the information that we read in the ordinance above. I agree additional dividing of parcel number 1 is highly unlikely, but I recommend placement of a written restriction on the deed to prevent this from occurring should the application be approved. And my last concern. My final concern is actually one I find to be the most troubling issue of the application. Review of the exhibit map prepared by 45 North Surveying LLC, page 114 of the 130-page packet tonight, shows a diagram of the current property and how it is oriented to South Ivy and Southwest 8th Avenue. Notice the diagram indicates the location of the existing house where only 12 feet 6 inches separates the existing house from the western lot and the existing neighbor's property. Notice also that the proposed driveway access to the newly created parcel number 2 is 12 feet wide and is the minimum allowed by our Public Roads Department. I'm greatly concerned that this does not provide a safe navigation corridor for access to parcel 2. This is very, very close to the existing home. In fact, the current roof overhang is currently inside the area proposed for the 12-foot driveway. I will concede that the applicant, who is a homeowner of parcel 1, likely determined this is acceptable to her, but this is also going to impact the neighbor to the west, whose home is also very close to that 12-foot driveway. It appears the neighbor's dwelling is only about 12 feet from that proposed access driveway. Certainly this will have an impact on the quality of their life, with the sound of vehicles driving right past them in their living quarters where none had been before. I note Ordinance 16-16030D3, Development Standards for Low-Density Residential Zone, indicates the minimum yard requirement for an interior yard, also known as a side yard, is 7 feet, but the code seems to be silent regarding how to apply the setback to an easement or right-of-way, in this case a 12-foot driveway to parcel 2. It would not seem unreasonable to have a 7-foot setback in addition to the 12-foot driveway, in which case this driveway cannot be placed between the existing home on parcel 1 and the property line. The current application shows that area is being used for both the setback and the driveway easement simultaneously. A possible remedy. I perceive a possible remedy to the close and narrow driveway. It may be more desirable to require the private access driveway to the flag lot be relocated to the other side of parcel 1 near to Ivy Street, where the land survey diagram shows there's approximately 38 feet of clearance between the property line and the foundation of the existing dwelling. This would require the reconfiguration of the current driveway and entry to the garage in parcel 1, but it seems to be a viable solution that would have less impact on all 3 property owners, parcel 1, parcel 2, and the neighbor to the west. See the attached diagram for a visual representation of the possible remedy. In summary, I recommend approving the proposed minor land partition with the condition that the access driveway or easement be located on the east side of the property nearer Ivy Street, and limit newly created parcel 2 to a single-family residence, and limit parcel number 1 also to a single-family residence with no future division for additional land division. And that's it. Thank you.
Any commissioners have questions?
Do we need to have a setback in addition to that driveway? Is there a rule about that? I could not find it anywhere in the ordinance.
No, there
It's
isn't.
silent.
All the flag lots that are done, people that build driveways on their private properties, they can build them right up to a property boundary. We have no setbacks for driveways.
Even though this one's not a flag lot?
The only setback is 5 foot when it reaches the front property boundary with the street. That's where we ask now, and that wasn't true until 2012. It wasn't even a requirement at the street that it be not on the property line until 2012.
Deeply respect your work on this one. It's going to be fun. That's a tough driveway. Thank you.
You're welcome. Bob Cambus. Please state your name and address again, please.
My name is Bob Camber. I live at 1338 North Maple. I originally had 2 concerns, but I guess the county has alleviated one concern about the sidewalk on Ivy. My second concern is just that someone take a good look at the quality of the sidewalk that remains on 8th. A visual by myself indicates that the sidewalk is in need of repair. It's disjointed. There are parts of it that have sunk and things like that. So I assume that part of the requirement, either from the city or something that is that a homeowner is required to maintain the quality of the sidewalk in front of them, their home. So I'm hoping during this construction part or your approval part that they will relook at the quality of that sidewalk there to make sure it meets current standards as far as walkability and not just the part of with the driveway, but the connecting part of the sidewalk. And I would ask that you incorporate that into your approval.
Thank you.
Questions?
Well, I guess we'll close, at this point, close the public hearing. Do I hear a motion?
Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, I will move that we would approve MLP 18-02 based on, with staff recommendations and a very strong encouragement to look at reducing the width size of the driveway and doing everything in your power to alleviate some of the concerns of the neighbors next door.
I want to add to that the county taking away the restriction number 4 from the county.
Oh, yeah, and removing restriction number 4 from the county based on the capital improvement project that is happening.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. MLP 18-02 is passed.
Chair?
Yes, sir.
I oppose.
Oh, okay, 1 nay. We need another, that's a quorum, right? 3. MLP 18-02 is passed. Now, Brian.
Final decisions.
So now we have some final decisions.
Okay. Final decision on SUB 17-01. Is that right? Oh, that's the other one, okay. Clark Piedmont.
Yeah.
Final decision on Clark Piedmont DR 18-0T /CUP 18-01.
Mr. Vice Chair, I move that we approve the final findings on Clark Piedmont DR 18-02 /CUP 18-01.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Clark Piedmont DR 8. Opposed. Did you vote
Did you?
oppose that the first time? Oh, I didn't ask, did I?
No, you didn't.
I apologize. Clark Piedmont, DR 18-02 /CUP 18-01, final approval. Final decision on MLP 18-02 Matheson.
Vice Chair, I'll move to approve Matheson MLP 18-02 as proposed by the staff, with the exception of item 4 from the county.
Opposed? The motion is passed. Final approval 18-02 Matheson.
We'll add to that findings that you believe that narrowing the driveway after the 20 feet would be appropriate. Okay.
Do we have any items of interest? Report from the planning staff.
No, just a quick comment, I guess, is we had a directors meeting today, as we do every week where there's a city council meeting, and I went through a whole list of development projects in this community. It must have been 22 projects long, just in the past 2 weeks. We're just swamped with people doing things, and there's questions from architects and engineers and applicants about each and every one of them. Many are still in the just after the pre-app meetings. So they're in the planning stage and trying to get code questions answered and figure out how to write their narratives for submittal of an application, et cetera. And then others that in all stages of development that we're still in. So this is by far the busiest I've ever been in the nearly 10 years I've been here. I mean, just like 6, 7, 8 times what we've ever had before.
All right, then. Any interest or guidance from the Planning Commission? I hear a motion to adjourn.
Chair, I move we adjourn this meeting.
All in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
John?
That's how I hear.
I'm an aye this.
Meeting is adjourned.
Yeah, make sure to look at your agenda because the next meeting is canceled due to a holiday.
Oh,
It'll be June 11th?
Yeah.
Yeah, June 11th's the next one.
thank you. Thank you, commissioners. See you next month.